Good late afternoon, everyone, or early evening, wherever you may be, and welcome to Infodyne, Colorado, Western Colorado at that, focusing on Durango, Telluride, and we're going to meet the fast-rising artist, Jed Webster Smith, soon. We're going to take you to him. But before we get to him, we thought in this Colorado theme, we would tell you about Infodyne and its passion for connecting you with influencers, artists, leaders, and others in the community, offering great food and more. But we're going to give you a little slice of Colorado. We're going to talk to Ryan Mascilak. And Ryan basically went through the Berkeley School of Music. You know, they just don't let anybody in there. And Ryan, we're going to go ahead and cross the Rocky Mountains, follow the geography, go across the Great Plains, and we're going to the White Mountains of Vermont. And Ryan, tell us a little bit about yourself and then give us a song, please. That's appropriate for today's Western Colorado version of Infodyne.
Well, thank you, Paul. Yeah, it's great to be here and be part of this event. So, yep, I graduated from Berkeley College of Music in Boston, played guitar, piano, and voice, primarily a composer, songwriter, with a specialty in holiday and Christmas music, some of my favorite music. And it's great to be on these mountains. And I tell you, between the beautiful artwork that we're going to see tonight and this music, I'm finding myself already feeling like I'm in Colorado. So I'm going to sing a song that everybody will know, one of my heroes, the late, great John Denver. He was born in the summer of his 27th year, coming home to a place he'd never been before. He left yesterday behind him. You might say he was born again. You might say he found a key for every door. When he first came to the mountains, his life was far away, on the road, hanging by a song. But the string's already broken, and he doesn't really care. It keeps changing fast, and it don't last for long. But the Colorado Rocky Mountain High, I've seen it rain and fire in the sky. The shadow from the starlight is softer than a lullaby. Rocky Mountain High. He climbed Cathedral Mountains, he saw silver clouds below. He saw everything as far as you can see. And they say that he got crazy once, and he tried to touch the sun. And he lost a friend, but kept his memory. Now he walks in quiet solitude, the forest and the streams, seeking grace in every step he takes. His side is turned inside himself to try and understand the serenity of a clear blue mountain lake. And the Colorado Rocky Mountain High, I've seen it raining fire in the sky. You can talk to God, listen to the casual reply. Rocky Mountain High. Now his life is full of wonder, but his heart still knows some fear of a simple thing he cannot comprehend. when they try to tear the mountains down and bring in a couple more people, more scars upon the land. And the Colorado Rocky Mountain High, I've seen it rain and fire in the sky. I know he'd be a poor man if he never saw an eagle fly. Rocky Mountain High, it's a Colorado Rocky Mountain High. I've seen it rain and fire in the sky. Friends around the campfire, everybody's high. Rocky Mountain High. Rocky Mountain High. Rocky Mountain High.
Golf clap for Ryan, or whatever's appropriate when you're streaming. You certainly don't want any loud thunder. Super appreciate your joining us, Ryan. And Ryan will have another song for us, again, appropriate for Western Colorado. That's later in our streaming cast, if you want to call it that. Also, listen to this. You're going to get a Jed Webster Smith free bit of recent art if you can answer this trivia question. What brought about, what was the origin of John Denver riding Rocky Mountain High? What was that song about? So without any more ado, we're going to bring in Jed Webster Smith. So thrilled to have you come to us from the Durango Telluride area. And the first thing is, we need to ask you, like we were talking about John Denver, what is it that inspires you? What fuels you, Jed?
Absolutely, Paul. Thank you again for having me. And thanks, Ryan. That was beautiful. Very wonderful performance. As far as inspiration for me, it's where I'm at. I mean, I grew up in the South Central region of Colorado, the San Luis Valley. And that area from a very early age inspired me just with the amount of wilderness at my fingertips. And then the whole myth of the West, what it means to be out here in the West, and that being a very unique and specific American identity, idea. And as I grew up, I was surrounded by this. I was surrounded by the very factual West. I'm going out hiking. I'm seeing these old mining towns and really kind of exploring the past that way. And then while at the same time, looking at popular culture, looking at the Westerns of Hollywood and being fascinated by that as well. So it's this dueling kind of inspiration and intrigue for me that I continue to just push further. And I found that a way to kind of express that and dig deeper into it and to get more out of it, to learn more about it, was through my art. So this one, for example, this is a piece I did back in 2020. And it is very much looking at the Western landscape, the celebration of the West. I spent a lot of time kind of down in the Four Corners region with my family since before I could even walk. It's just something I've always known, but going to that area and hiking around in those Red Rock canyons, it's something that I still do. And it's where, if I ever am in a slump, whether it be in the studio or outside, that's a place that I know I can go to, reconnect, kind of refuel. And then, man, I've got a bunch of different ideas rolling for the studio.
And we should note that's you with a mustache.
That is me. Yeah, minus the mustache. I used to have a mustache. That's gone now. Clean shaven. So.
And we see the mess behind you. We see the colors you use. Talk about some of the choices that you make when you go into the actual, painting of what you're going to see every day.
Sure, absolutely. So there's a lot of different. I guess firstly, I'm looking at what's in front of me, looking at these landscapes or the subjects that I'm painting. I do a lot of, I'll go out with friends, different colleagues and stuff, and we'll go out into these different wild places, and I'll take a lot of different reference photos. I'll do sketches, and trying to capture that moment, the lighting, the surrounding, and also having the model really be a part of that at the same time. And then I will go back into the studio and actually create these watercolors, because it's just not really doable at the scale that I'm working at with these watercolors to be out there in plein air and trying to capture them. So I'll start with these compositional studies based on that reference material I was talking about, that I collected. And then once I get a good idea of these through the thumbnails, then I'll do a more serious drawing and really look at the anatomy of it. And then that last slide there, that was the color studies slide. And those are just small little, 8x8s. And that's where I'm looking at the color combinations for a composition, and to see if, hey, that red shirt's gonna work, or maybe I need to switch it to another color, or remember that underneath the hat brim goes from warm to cool. And it's a really loose kind of stage here, and a lot of problem solving, because watercolor is so unforgiving. You put that pigment down onto the paper, it's there. So you do have to have this kind of game plan. At least that's how I go about with these. And I also really like these little color studies too, because they are pretty, again, loose and free. And then you see all the marks around the side. That's me testing how that color dries onto the paper, if that's the right, saturation that I want. And so in a way, they're like little love letters to the painting itself, because you have all these just quick little marks as I go through the process of actually building and constructing this painting, which then that next slide will be the final painting for that. And so that's 36 by 36 inches. So almost life size. So that's where, and I do pack a lot of detail into my watercolors, and then try to balance that with that stark background that really resonates with me as the West, the feeling of the air of where I come from the San Luis Valley. But I think that balance between the detail and then that negative space helps to move the viewer around the compositions. So, yeah.
And you're showing us the modern American West, but you're also showing us throwbacks. In a way, you're sort of a historian, and I know you do a lot of research and you make sure that you get that detail right.
You're absolutely right. Yeah, I really am fascinated by a lot of primary documents. I love reading old journals or just different writings on the West, on the individuals, the landscape, the politics. And then I try to relate that to this present moment, to my own experience, and to try to use the West, the individuals, and the myths that exist to describe things that are currently happening in our own, everything that's happening today between the environment, politics, and identity. Those are big for me in my work. And so I'll be flipping through these different primary documents, and sometimes in the margins, there'll just be one little quote about how maybe bison were laid with strychnine to try to get pelts from wolves and coyotes during the fur trapping days. And on the margins, I'll sketch out just a really quick little idea, because it's something that there's something there, and I can sit on that for a while. But that's a big source of inspiration for me as well, is reading those primary documents.
You're also an expert at animal anatomy. If we look at, for example, how you paint a horse, it's remarkable to see all of the nuances that are involved in all those different parts of the horse and that sort of thing. And explain, if you can, please, what we're looking at right now.
Absolutely. And thank you. I got my master's from the New York Academy of Art, and it's it was quite the experience. And I took a lot of anatomy classes and worked live from different animals that they would actually bring in to Tribeca in like a cart there, and they bring it in. And so we'd actually work from the live animals as well. So I had a lot of training for that too. But with this piece, Lost Male, this was one I created during my time at the Academy. And it's actually a pretty profound piece for me, just in my own journey as an artist. It felt like a lot of the ideas that I were working on, and then how I was applying the paint, it really came together in this final piece here. And again, this is where I started really developing that rigorous, just trying to make sure that I make all the different drawings ahead of time, the color studies, and just making sure that I don't cut any corners. So that was a big part of just even the development of this painting. But with this one specifically, Lost Male, it was created around the time of the 2020 election cycle. And I wanted to use the West as a metaphor to describe the present moment. And I thought, well, okay, I'm out here in New York City, and I am voting by mail. And that at that time, there was a lot of questioning about, is it safe? Is it, what's gonna happen? And there was a tax on that, as you remember. But that was how I was able to vote for being, where I live now in Colorado and what I call home. But Lost Male is looking at that and is investigating the use of the Pony Express, which, going mass amounts of distances across the Western landscape, and bringing information and bringing even ballots. And in my research, I found that the Pony Express, it was a very secure method of transferring information pre-telegraph, telephone. They would actually have locked mail satchels that would go over the pommel of the saddle. And then as the rider came in with his horse that was, played out, then they'd pull that satchel off, put it onto the next fresh horse. And that was a way to keep that information moving in a timely fashion and in a secure fashion, because it was all under lock and key. So it's me thinking about the general election and, the security of it. If we can do it back then, we're doing it now. We can still do that. And then even looking at that horse in that painting, you'll see there's two reins, and one is wrapped around the horse and the other is flying freely. And so part of that representation is looking at the two-party system, the horse as the American people. And so I want the viewer, as they look into this image further, those little details start to expose themselves. And then one final thing is I do include with some of my larger watercolors, I call them pseudo artifacts. And the next slide kind of shows the actual mail bundle that I say, comes from the on loan from the Museum of Western History. And these are found objects. So you have embedded within that, some actual mail ballots from the 1890s. And so to kind of spark the viewer to question, again, what they're looking at and how that relates to that painting.
Well, we thank you so much for that. We're going to come back to you in just one moment, Jed, but we want to remind you, put your comments in the comment area. Don't forget, if you want to try to get a little original piece of art from Jed, it's wonderful, black and white. Go ahead and answer that question. What was it that inspired John Denver's Rocky Mountain High? We're going to have more of this. We're going to have Brian Mascilak and another song later. Keep enjoying Infodyne Western Colorado. And don't go away. We'll be back in just a couple seconds. And we are back. Jed, I think now's the time for us to talk about scope and size. Many
Sure.
of your paintings are rather large. They're dramatic. They fill up a room. And obviously, that is something that you want to bring to your buyers, people who want your art. Talk to us about that.
Absolutely, absolutely. So yes, you're right. My watercolors are quite large. The largest one to date is 88 inches by 52 inches. Um, and while I'm creating these subversive depictions of the West with all this detail embedded within it, scale definitely is always on my mind. And I want to give room for all those details to have their moment. And so that's part of the reason that I go larger. The fact that I'm dealing with the myth of the West, Western landscapes, that's just a large idea in and of itself. And so I want the viewer to really get enveloped in that painting. When they get up close and personal with it, it at sometimes could be dwarfing them, standing 7 foot above them almost. And I want them to be able to really look at all these details in watercolor, to help build that picture and to bounce around the painting itself. And one of the things too, Paul, is very early on in my career in undergrad, I would actually use watercolor as a way to study for an upcoming oil painting. I used to work more in oils, but I just started to really, really enjoy how watercolor worked and how it described what I was trying to depict. And at a certain point, they said, well, why does this just have to be the study stage? Why can't the watercolor be the final presentation, the final painting? And I went for it with these larger pieces. I said, yeah, let's go all in with the watercolors.
So speaking of larger pieces, you made me think of Rembrandt in my trip to the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam. And I remember the scale just left me like this. It was jaw-dropping. You look at the Night Watchman. And so I know you're a humble guy. You're not a shameless bragger, but you're starting to get some cachet around the world. And for people out there who want to know, where can I see some upcoming exhibitions? Where have you been? Where are you going? Give us a little rundown, please.
Sure, absolutely. I've shown both nationally and internationally. I've had several shows, group shows in New York, and I've worked quite extensively in Denmark with Gallery Poulsen. That's my gallery, and I'm preparing for my first solo. This upcoming, we're slated to do it this upcoming winter or maybe spring of 2024. We're just trying to see how it all kind of fits together. But that'll be a big one. I just sent several pieces over there for Art Herning that just happened this past weekend. And those are all through Artsy. You can look up Jed Webster Smith and you can see what pieces have been shown, what are available. And that's another gallery that I'm working with too, that's also has online stuff with Artsy with some of my pieces, is Visions West Contemporary, and they're out of Montana and Colorado. And I have a couple pieces in their group show right now up in Denver. Counter Cowboy 2 is what that one's called. So, yeah.
Okay, so now you're going to take us inside your studio.
Okay.
Time for you to actually paint. You've done your research. You've taken copious notes. And so are you one of those guys that blast the music? Do you like quiet? Do you like podcast? What do you do when you're in the studio?
That's a great question. I used to be a real night owl in undergrad, and that would be when I'd be able to find time to produce. So it was much more of a quieter time for me at that stage in my career. But treating it now as a full-time job, I mean, I get up in the morning, I start off getting a little bit of some warm-up sketches, and then start mixing some of my pigments, and look where I left off within a watercolor. And at that time, I usually like it pretty quiet. I'm not listening to anything. But once I feel like, I've kind of warmed up, getting ready for that workout, then that's when I'll put on music or different podcasts. But some of the musicians that I'm just very much respect and have almost every day in the studio would be Orville Peck, Lana Del Rey, and then some other classics. I mean, I love the Stones. So it varies throughout the day. And then I'll listen to different art podcasts. I really like Smartless, just for a little bit of background. But when I'm working on pretty detailed sections, say, a portrait of somebody and really working on the lighting on their face, I'll often just work in silence at that time.
And so you said that sometimes you go to the classics like the Stones or Lana Del Rey. There is sort of a musical or rhythmic quality to painting. You probably feel like a musician who's in a groove when things are coming together.
I feel like when I find, I'm in the right mood and things are working, I can really see the brush strokes. And I work with a lot of small brush strokes to then compose these larger images. And so you're right, there is a lot of rhythm. And I do think that is an important factor within the studio, just having that music in the background that really I can, in some ways, play off of. It just helps keep me in the zone, in the mood to really focus in on the work.
And you're working in watercolor, as you highlighted, and some would say that's like walking the tightrope without a net. There's no going back and, fixing it with more oil or more paint. Oh, describe that, because it's risky.
You're right. It is risky. And that's, again, where just really doing your due diligence, at least that's how my practice is, where I really develop studies and then go into the color study stages. So when I get to that final painting, man, I have the confidence when I put that brush stroke down, it's going to be that brush stroke like that. That's where it is. And one thing that I found is the way that I actually prepare my watercolors for exhibition is I actually mount them to the canvas itself to make it more of an object. And I don't want the viewer to feel like they have a barrier of glass or plexiglass between them and the painting. But what happens is I actually do that as a final stage. I will actually pin the watercolor to a board, kind of like you see in the background here. And I'll work on that and really develop that painting until it's about 90% complete. And at that point, and I feel like, okay, this is something that I'm happy with and I want to present this somewhere down the road, then I'll actually stretch the canvas to a board, make sure there are no any folds or anything in the canvas. And then I lay a couple layers of this gesso or this gloss gel down, which is one, to isolate the canvas and the paper, and then two, and I just use a big rolling brush to make sure it's all smoothed out. And then two, I will actually lightly sand it, so that way, again, there's no bubbles or anything like that. And the final stage is I actually take the watercolor, again, that's about 90% complete. I flip it over and I have to wet the entire back of the surface of that paper. And this is really tricky. You got to be in the right mind space, because if any of that water gets underneath the paper, it's going to bleed onto the painting and kind of, you can imagine, kind of wash it out. But what this does, it's essential because it actually flattens out the paper again. Because as I work into these watercolors, the paper buckles and bends. And so when I do this, it gets flat as a board. And then I have that fresh glue on the canvas and I mount it and I start rolling out with a brayer to get it nice and flat onto that canvas. Once it dries, I stretch it to the stretcher And now it has so much more of a presence, and the viewer can be right up and close with it.
That's great. And don't forget to put your questions in the chat if you want to ask any. And here's one. Someone wanted to know, how do you prepare for an exhibition? What goes into that? What choices are made?
Sure. That's a good question. So again, earlier on, I was talking about collecting information in books or ideas or going out and being inspired by the outdoors. I'll look back at those notes and see what ones are relating and how they're kind of telling a story to me in that moment. And that for me gives me an idea, okay, this is how I can move forward, for example, with like a solo exhibition. Other ones where it's group exhibitions, you'll have specific themes that I say, oh, this could be a good idea for that theme that I've been sitting on. Maybe a winterscape because it's dealing with the dark depths of winter or something like that. But I look at a lot of those ideas, and then that's when I start doing the studies, the thumbnails, and moving it forward into color studies.
And as we highlighted earlier, we're going to give away a piece of your recent art for anybody who can guess what it was that inspired John Denver's Rocky Mountain High. If we can look at that, describe what this is from and what you are going for here, as you love to give us the sense of the American West.
Sure. So I think that was the first slide of the Lino Cut print, I believe. That's what you're asking about?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah. So that's a part of my process. I mean, the watercolors take quite amount of time to produce. You're layering just layer upon layer. And so they can take up to a month to 2 months to produce. And with these Lino Cuts here, they're very satisfying because I can knock one of these out in a day in the studio, which is great because it creates that balance of a longer project and then something that has that pretty much immediate satisfaction. And I really just love printmaking in general. That's what I did a lot in undergrad. I love the on-off quality of print. And so these guys are just cut using just little blades into the Lino Cut and using a brayer to put down the ink. And I'm just hand pulling these. I don't have any printmaking machine. So I'm just using a Baron to press it up. And this is the relief that is produced out of that. And it's just another way to kind of work with my imagination, thinking about line and thinking about form. And so I like to do a couple new Lino Cuts each year at the beginning of the year to kind of start fresh. So this is actually the first new image of 2024 for me.
And it certainly evokes the feeling of the American West. And did you notice it's called Blood Moon, and it's only one of 15 for you art collectors out there. And again, you can win this if you guess correctly as to what inspired Rocky Mountain High. Jed, hang tough. We're going to take a little bit of a break again. And also Ryan Mascilak is going to come back and sing a Colorado-oriented song for all of us. See you in a few seconds.
Sounds good.
I looked around at my other colleagues and I realized everybody had an MBA, and that's when I knew if I wanted to go any further in this company, I needed to further my education.
The Executive MBA at Cal Lutheran is really a chance to further your education, but in an atmosphere that's conducive to your worlds.
PR, marketing, statistics, metrics, analytics, all those things that I learned in the program, I'm able to apply.
It was just great to have faculty who have the real world experience, but also understand how to impart that knowledge to folks in a classroom. it's an accomplishment that you can share with your existing network to help you kind of advance to the next level.
It actually got me into an interview for a different position.
I got promoted to the director of programming and operations for the whole music department.
You're going to walk back into your job or into a new job and really kind of have a wider view of what the possibilities are. To me, that's the number one thing.
Here we are again, at the beginning of everything. Hello, AI, blockchain, smart cities, the total transformation of how we live, work, and move. Yes, business is set to harness some extremely powerful ideas. And we say, let's do this. Now is the time to create the world we want. So, take charge of the change, and let's begin.
And now that we're back here live with Infodyne, just super quick, Jed, I wanted to let them know I'm the communications director for ShelterBox, and you saw that clip from Somalia. We're basically, what do you do right after disaster? Well, we bring in the white tents and the cookware. And if you want to see more about ShelterBox, obviously go to ShelterBoxUSA.org. I worked for CNN for 26 years. I covered ShelterBox extensively. And I was thrilled when they called me and asked me to come on as communications director because it's just so rewarding. And there's 110 million displaced people around the planet right now. And that's not me saying this, that's per the UN. But back to Jed. All right, so we've had a lot of folks chime in. There's been some great questions. And I know that this was asked before, but I want to go back to inspiration. Was there something in your childhood that just told you, I have to paint?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, other than I think one of the primary factors being the outdoors, both my parents growing up were educators. So we would travel the United States during the summer and go to these different museums and cultural institutions. And I think that's something that really inspired me from an early age as well. I got to see a lot of incredible art here in the United States. And so that kind of propelled me. I mean, the classics like N.C. Wyeth and Maynard Dixon, just huge inspirations to me, along with Walton Ford and Logan Maxwell Agege. Those guys, I got to see their stuff early on, and then they still are such huge inspirations. And anytime I can get to an exhibition for that my art heroes are in, I'm going for it. And there's been a lot of mentors along the way that have pushed me to keep building my own skills in my art. And saying, you've got something going on here, just keep developing. And folks like Jeannie Braco and Peter Drake and Thomas Blackshear, incredible artists and museum professionals that have helped me see things in a different way.
And someone has asked in the chat, what would be your dream project?
Ooh, dream project. Well, you know what? That's a good one. But right now it's creating my first solo. It's been a dream from a very early age. I am so excited to be doing this with Gallery Poulsen over in Denmark. And that's a major goal of mine, has been for some time. So that's a big one. That's a dream project right now. And just another one is really making a career out of this and being able to do this. As long as I'm on this earth, I want to be able to be creating.
And so when we talk about a dream project, would you ever consider doing a large mural, let's say, in a downtown area or elsewhere?
Yes, I have done some back in undergrad. The way that I work now with watercolor, that would be, that would be interesting as far as the type of project. But, yeah, that's creating. If it were the right project, I'd absolutely be interested in that. And that's something too, where you're working with a team of people. So, you're not alone in that. And I really like the relationships, because that's just the way that great art happens too, is as a team, either developing a piece together or shooting ideas off of each other and saying, oh man, I like this, but you should, what if you tweak this section here? Yeah.
Speaking of tweaks, faces are not easy. I think every artist would say that. You painted your own face as well, as we were alluding to earlier. As we look at some of the faces you painted,
Yeah.
how do you approach getting them right and, of course, capturing the emotion that you want to at that moment that you're bringing to us?
Sure. So likeness is important, but it's not the primary thing for me. It is more what is being evoked within this image. What am I trying to say, or what was that feeling when I was with those models, when we were out in the desert, trying to capture these moments. And so that's really important for me, and trying to really infuse that into the work of art. I'm often satisfied when the painting comes out and it's recognizable as that individual. But again, that's not the primary goal for me. It's more that feeling and thinking about that time when we were again developing this painting, because without them, the painting would not exist either. So it's thinking about that moment in time and trying to evoke those emotions too.
And maybe you can add to this question, how do you make those monochromatic reductive drawings?
Oh, yes, that's a good one. Yeah, so those are a little further in the slides there. They're the black and white or the sepia tone. And this is a technique that was pioneered by my mentor, Peter Drake, at the New York Academy of Art. And he showed me about these. What you do is you actually, it's a little further down. These are the shellac cowboys. And what you do is you use sandpaper. Yeah, this is one of them. And you start off with everything being completely black. So it's an acrylic, just flat black. And then underneath, I have put 3 layers of gesso on top of a bristle board. And so as you use the sandpaper to remove the black surface, that white begins to expose itself in varying degrees. And I just was immediately attracted to this way of working. And it pushed me, because watercolor is the way that I'm working with it, I'm working very hard line. And with these reductive drawings, I have to use just sandpaper from Ace. And so I don't have the ability to get the same hard lines that I would with a watercolor. And so it's a softer medium. And it's also the reverse of watercolor, in that I'm going from dark to light versus light to dark. So these are, I've really enjoyed them.
You're listening to the Western artist, Jed Webster Smith, here on Infodine. We're taking you to Western Colorado. Another question that popped up in the chat is, did you have any jobs, what other jobs did you do that might have impacted your art?
Yeah, I worked in undergrad, and then through several years before I went back for my master's in the museum field. And I worked specifically in exhibitions as a mount maker and helping to build and develop shows across the Southwest here, from Durango down to Santa Fe. Did a lot of mount making at that point in my time. And that's something that I still do as well. I really enjoy that part of this business, where I get to create my own schedule with my art, but then really work with these amazing institutions, and what incredible collections that they have. And every time I do that, I'm learning something. You know, these images, these paintings, these artifacts, they all have a story, and to have the privilege to be able to work with them is amazing.
And when you're working in color, give us a sense for how many options there are. How many different colors can you dip that brush into?
Oh, they're endless. It's endless. But I I often start off, I mean, it's very light washes, and I have some of my favorites. I love earth tones, burnt umbers, raw siennas, and I'll start to build the forms with some of those colors, uh, and then infuse it with more of these dramatic reds and blues. Um, but a lot of that mixing will happen on the surface of the canvas there, on the surface of the watercolor paper, and it's just through that layering. That first layer might be a light red, then you start to put that blue on top, which then helps your eye to turn it into a purple, or it's a lot of that. It grows as it develops further along.
And so I think I should answer the trivia question now. If you know what the Perseid meteor shower is, Jed, have you ever seen it in Colorado?
It's a good question.
Everyone would say, "Oh my gosh, shooting stars, shooting stars." It's a mass of shooting stars in the Perseid area of the sky. And Denver looked up and he saw this, and the wonderment inspired the song. What I find to be comical about it is a lot of folks who perhaps just maybe indulged in something called acid or whatever think it's a drug song, but it hardly is. And so who gets a little bit of Jed Webster Smith's art? Well, we're going to give it to Barbara Novak. I think she came closest because she said it was inspired by his love of nature. I'm reading right now and its wonders. So well played there. Any final thoughts, Jed, before we get to be played out by Ryan later on as you sit there right now? What would you like people to know most about your art and your commitment to capturing the West?
Yeah. I mean, I'm still very much an emerging artist. And I feel like with the way that I'm working with these watercolors and the myth of the West, the ideas there, it's just beginning. There's so much out there. There's so many different stories that I want to try to tell or through my paintings. But I really appreciate you all taking the time to hear a little bit about my practice and what I do, and being supporters of the arts. All of you here right now, you're supporting the arts by doing this. So thank you.
Well, we appreciate you. And by the way, I just want to add, I know you're appreciated in Western and Northern Europe. There's a real fascination for the American Western. I want to know if you ever had a sense for that.
You know what? It's a new thing that I've found that's where a lot of my work has brought in a lot of interest. So I want to just dig further into that, and I'm hoping to this year get over to Europe to explore a bit more.
Well, full disclosure, I'm an anchor baby by way of Belgium, and I know they just love Western art in the lowland countries and Denmark, as you highlighted. And I think you'll have tremendous success there. So I want to thank you again, Jed, on Infodine here, giving us a glimpse into the Telluride, Durango area from an artist perspective. Rather cool.
Thank you, Paul. And Paul, thanks for the work that you do as well.
Well, I appreciate your saying that. All right, we're going to take a trek across the Rockies as we did earlier. This is just such a rare treat. We're going to go to the White Mountains. We're off to listen to Ryan Mascilak, and he is a graduate of the Berkeley School of Music. He's steeped in tradition. You might have heard him say earlier, Ryan say that he studied holiday songs, but in this particular instance, he's going to give us another dose in a good way. Don't you dare make a wisecrack about my acid joke. He's going to give us another dose of John Denver. And we want to go to Ryan right now. And let's hear another tune from him as he takes us out on this amazing and rather informative version of Infodine.
I guess he'd rather be in Colorado. He'd rather spend his time out where the sky looks like a pearl after the rain. Once again I see him walking. Once again I hear him talking to the stars he makes and asking them for bus fares. I guess he'd rather be in Colorado. He'd rather play his banjo in the morning when the moon is scarcely gone. In the dawn, the subway's coming. In the dawn, I hear him humming some old song he wrote of love in Boulder Canyon. I guess he'd rather be in Colorado. I guess he'd rather work out where the only thing you earn is what you spend. In the end, up in his office, in the end, a quiet cough is all he has to show. He lives in New York City. I guess he'd rather be in Colorado.
Is Alexis Saji. She's going to explain more about Infodyne, a program that she has. Any of you who are the least bit of a foodie are going to enjoy this. And go ahead and join us now, Alexis. We want to hear what you're up to and how all of us can be envious and wish we were sitting at a table filled with food.
Hi, everyone. I'm the owner of Farm to Fingers, a local catering company in Durango, Colorado. And so for those of you that are interested in our upcoming in-person Infodyne dinner party titled Art, Wine, in the West, my team and I will be preparing a farm-to-table 5-course meal highlighting local farms from our Southwest Colorado area. We are also working with a local winery to prepare a wine tasting pairing for each course. And the evening will focus on more of Jed's work, and you'll have the opportunity to meet him in person and ask him some of your own questions. And you'll also be able to view some of his pieces of his work during the evening. The dinner party will take place in both Durango and in Telluride, Colorado. And I'm sure those tickets are going to sell out quickly, and there are limited seats. So keep your eyes peeled for those links to purchase yours.
And it's a
Back to you,
perfect
Paul.
relationship, Alexis, because like Jed's art, your food is not filled with preservatives and it's not contrived. There's not a bunch of junk cluttering it up. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so I think the idea, my business started out as just a charcuterie board, grazing board business. During the pandemic, actually, we had boxes delivered to people's doorsteps, so it was contactless. And I really worked with local farmers and local businesses to add their ingredients into the boxes so folks could have kind of a taste of everything while they were locked up in their home. And the company just grew exponentially over the last 2 years. We now do full weddings, full catering for dinners, for the house, for intimate parties, for larger gatherings. We have bartending services, we have rentals now, and desserts as well. So we're kind of just expanding like crazy.
Well, I'm glad to hear you're expanding and it sounds like next level fun. We're looking at some of your food and your products right now. Fill in this blank for me. People leave one of your events and they say, this blank tasted so great. What are some of the more popular things that you've been serving?
Oh, we have a blackberry brie basil crostini that is super, super delicious for an hors d'oeuvre. And then we've made 3 of our own products actually that are in a couple local grocery stores. One is the chimichurri, another is the romesco, and then our mint pistachio pesto. And the chimichurri is on our tri-tip for dinners, and people rave about that. That's, I think, a highlight. And
you put a lot of love and time into this. Can you explain the effort it takes to put something on a table like this?
Yeah, I mean, this is my off season, but I'm really working behind the scenes with all the clients, working, talking to brides constantly by email, by phone. We're writing up the invoicing. I'm doing the marketing behind the scenes. I'm helping with the accounting. I'm doing everything. So I think just the behind the scenes stuff is a lot. But then day of, I mean, we're in the kitchen from 7 in the morning, preparing all the food. And then we're driving it to the venue, which could be a couple hours away. And then we're at your wedding or at your event until, 10 p.m. at night, and then back to the kitchen to clean up everything and make sure everything's tidied up. So it's a full day of really a lot of effort and love.
And final thought, because I know somebody somewhere is going to say to themselves, I want Farm to Fingers to come to my event. Can they get here? What's the furthest you'll drive?
Ooh. We will. So the furthest is Southwest Colorado. So Uray, Telluride, Pagosa Springs, Silverton, Durango. I haven't ventured much further outside of those bounds. We've done a couple things in Moab, like styled shoots, but not anything up in Denver yet. So we just need you to ask.
Stay tuned. You Denver people, get involved. Otherwise, get to southwestern Colorado. Enjoy Farm to Fingers. Go ahead and join Jed's artwork. Ryan will play guitar. I really want to thank all of you for just giving us a slice of life and taking us away to Durango, Telluride. I super appreciate it. I hope all of you had fun as we had this great moment here with Infodyne, and talk about influencers and artists and up and coming folks here. I'm going to date myself. Are you ready? Old movie. I'm going to give you the Wayne's World We're Not Worthy About. I'm going to say bye to you and everyone else.
Thank you.
Thank you.